Hi, welcome to Give Me the Bible, where God's Word speaks for itself. In continuing our discussion of whether the Bible really is God's Word or not, I wanted to throw in a bonus video. And I don't normally do this because the Bible's not really a scientific book. When I say that, I mean we're not really meant to read the Bible to look for scientific explanations of things. That's just not what the Bible's purpose is. However, it is interesting to note that the Bible sometimes mentions scientific facts or interesting things about science that are powerful because they really weren't discovered sometimes for thousands of years later, and yet the Bible just mentions them in passing as if it's just a given that it's true. In fact, notice a couple examples. Genesis 17 with me. Genesis 17. This is where God is instituting circumcision as necessary for entering covenant with God. And notice what he says in 17:11, "And you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, and shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. And every male among you who is 8 days old shall be circumcised throughout your generations, a servant who is born in the house, or who is bought with money from any foreigner, who is not of your descendants." So here we have circumcision instituted, but I want you to notice when he says to do it. He tells Abraham to do it on the 8th day that a child is born. Now, honestly, sometimes numbers are significant in the Bible, and God uses certain numbers to represent certain things, just depending on the context. But 8 really isn't a number that God uses all that much throughout the Bible. 8 seems kind of like a random number. So the question is, why in the world would God just randomly choose the 8th day? There could have been so many other days that God could have chosen to tell Abraham to circumcise his children. Well, you'd be interested to note that in 1935, scientists named vitamin K responsible for helping to prevent hemorrhaging or massive bleeding in baby chicks. And actually in humans as well, vitamin K is also responsible to aid the liver's production of an element known as prothrombin. Now, vitamin K coupled with prothrombin causes blood to coagulate, which is very important for surgery. And during anywhere from the 5th to the 7th days of a newborn male's life, vitamin K levels are adequate for surgery. But from the 2nd through the 5th days, it's extremely dangerous for babies to have surgery because they could easily die from hemorrhaging. So, if vitamin K is adequate for surgery between the 5th and the 7th days, why in the world did God choose the 8th day? Well, doctors have discovered that on the 8th day, it is the only day of a male's life where vitamin K and prothrombin levels are over 100% of the normal level. Never again does vitamin K ever reach such a high peak in a male's life, making the 8th day the perfect day for a surgical procedure. Now, you take into account that this was written something like 4,000 years ago, and that's pretty impressive, okay, that God would choose the 8th day. And then it just so turns out that we discovered 4,000 years later that was actually the perfect day for a baby to have surgery. Another just few things in passing that the Bible mentions, Job 26 verse 7 talks about God hanging the earth on nothing. So that's just, again, he doesn't really provide any explanation. He just mentions it in passing as if it's just a given that God hangs the earth on nothing, that the earth is just kind of floating. And of course we know how that works with gravity and the other planets and things like that, but they shouldn't have known that back then. Job 26 verse 8 and also 36 27 through 29 talks about the cycle of evaporation and rainfall from the clouds. Genesis 7:11 and Job 38:16 talk about deep underwater springs of the ocean that really weren't discovered again until thousands of years later. Isaiah 40 verse 22 talks about the earth, God sitting above the circle of the earth. Okay, that connotes a spherical shape of the earth. Another word is a vault, which is again a roof that's shaped in an arc. Okay, so again, that wasn't discovered. People thought the earth was flat forever. God just mentions in passing in His Word that actually it's spherical. So there are other things like that in the Bible that are just interesting to note. That this really is God's Word. God knows exactly how He designed things, and He mentions them in His Word. I hope that's helpful, and I'll see you next time.